What's up, y'all? Welcome back. Today, I'm going to give some reviews on some books I recently read. We're going to do 4 reviews today. Let's get started. So, the first one that we're going to review is Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. This book, it was very different from what I typically read. It had a lot of good things working for it, but a couple of things that I didn't quite like. So let me start with what the story is about in general. Okay, it's about a main character named Tova. She's an elderly woman that's a recent widow, and she creates a friendship with a Pacific octopus, a Pacific giant octopus. I know that sounds crazy. That's what I thought when I first heard it. But it had such like a cute, I love that like unlikely friendship. Y'all know that. And I love elderly protagonists. So that was the two things that I had going for it. And a very unique ish storyline. Like there was obviously a lot of stuff that you're used to. But just like, come on, she friends with an octopus. That was just interesting to me. So that's what I had going for it, and I really liked that. But I figured out the plot twist at about 50% of the book. And even though I knew where it was headed, I still didn't know how the author would actually accomplish it. So I kept reading it. And once I figured out where the story was actually heading, I started liking it less. I still wanted to see how it actually ended. I mean, like how she actually got to that point. But I liked it less because everything else kind of dragged on from that moment. It kind of had a couple of things that I thought were meaningless and really didn't add to it, but it was still cute in a different kind of way. Like the book went over, again, it had unlikely friendship in there, and it had found family. That was kind of cool. But also, it really talked about in a light way. The book was a light book, but it had some heavy themes, but they were presented in a way that didn't make the book feel heavy. And that's kind of hard to do. So it did deal with grief. It did deal with like loss of a child, loss of a spouse. It dealt with drug addiction. It dealt with abandonment, um, mental health issues, stuff like that. But in a way that didn't make it feel heavy. And it wasn't because it was like, I think the author did a really good job. It's not because she didn't talk about it more, it's just because it was handled carefully. And I appreciated that in this book. It was good. Marcellus and Tova were my favorite characters, but and Marcellus is the Pacific giant octopus. It was good to me. I have seen plenty of people say that they don't like it, and I get it because it did have some parts that was like, okay, that whole like chapter was unnecessary, but it was still overall a good, cute book to me with some heavy things that were lightly sprinkled in there, but done well. Okay, the next book that I read, the second book on this list, is This Bitter Earth by Bernice McFadden. So, this is the sequel or the follow up to the Sugar Lacey story. I know I shared a few videos back that Sugar was a 5-star read for me. Bernice McFadden is a new to me author, and as soon as I finished Sugar, I went and bought This Bitter Earth because one, I love the way that she writes. Two, I told y'all like the story just felt so like familiar to me. It feels like a comfort movie that I would watch. Like it feels like stuff that I grew up watching, stuff that I like naturally gravitate towards. So I knew when I finished Sugar, I had to get This Bitter Earth. And what I can say is This Bitter Earth, it was good, but I like Sugar more. I still feel like I didn't get as high as I did when I read Sugar. But it was still good. I wanted to know what happened with the rest of the story. I wanted to know like how they resolved that issue that was present in the first book. And then I wanted to hear more about this small town. Like I wanted to hear after the first book ended, how did that shake up the people in this town? Did everybody else kind of shift? Like what changed since the first book? And you got that. She really didn't answer a lot of questions. She gave closure on something major that happened to Sugar. And I still think it was well done. Yes, I didn't like it as much as Sugar, but I still liked it. I still like the way Bernice McFadden writes. I plan on reading more of her work next year. And I mean, it was good. It was good. I had to know what happened with, again, that major issue that was in the first book. And she delivered, because, and added something else too that I thought was like really good and added to the storyline. I like the way that she tells her stories. And again, I'm mad that I'm just now reading her books because she been here and I just didn't know. I just didn't know. So that is the second book. The third book is one that everybody and their mama recommended to me, and I read it. This was Sky Full of Elephants by Cebo Campbell. This book was so creative and different. It's a speculative fiction, and I don't read many speculative fictions at all. I feel like it's just not something that I gravitate towards, but I'm glad that I read this. Cebo he's a really good storyteller. The only like It was a really good book, but the only issue that I had is I couldn't connect with like any of the characters for real. And not just because, not on some like I don't see myself in them type thing, but I just feel like I just I don't know, like typically I'll like attach to one or two characters in the book and I really like I'm invested in their story. Like what happens? Do they get what they want? I'm rooting for them, or in some cases like Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, I'm not rooting for them, but I'm so invested because I want to see that what I want happens to them or doesn't. In this book, there wasn't a character that I could like attach to and actually root for or like hate on. They were all just kind of like they were well done and developed, but none of them really stood out to me personally. The plot was great, the story was great. It had like a lot of deep undertones. It it's one of those books that like it reminded me kind of like reading a classic almost, because like what you see on the page, you could choose to read the book how it's written on the page. You could take the words and you can actually take it at face value, or you can take a step back and really try to understand or like analyze what he's actually saying. So you can read this book and be as superficial as you want, or you can make it as dense as you want, because I feel like there's so many thoughts that he's putting into those words and so many ideas that he's trying to convey that you could just read it how it's written and take it as like, oh yeah, speculative fiction, cool, I'm gonna move on. Or you could really like try to understand some of the stuff that he's trying to put out there, and it can be interpreted many ways. I feel like that's kind of like the makings of a good author, because it can go in whatever way that you want it to go. You want it to be a quick superficial read, it can be, and it'll still be good. Do you want to like analyze it and try to understand what themes that he was trying to put out, what concepts is he trying to get to the reader, what he believes about society, what he believes about, black people in general. So I found myself kind of going back and forth in between those two like trains of thought. So I read a portion and then I get to like another portion where I'm like, oh, okay, like let me really like take a step back and see like what is he actually trying to say about this. Like especially when they got to Alabama, I was really trying to figure out what worldview he was trying to like give off or like trying to convey. So it's good. It was a good book. I'm glad that I read it and it was recommended, because if I saw it on the shelf, I probably would pick it up because it looked interesting and the synopsis was good. It's about a world where I feel like everything I'm gonna say is gonna give it away, but it's about the collective black person, the black person thought, what it means to be black and the identity in America at first and then in the entire world, and what is whiteness? What does that look like? So it was a good book. I probably would have picked it up, and I'm glad I read it. I think it was well done. I think he was a great author. It was creative in a lot of ways. Yeah, I think it was pretty good. I'm glad I read it. Glad I read it. The last book on this list for the reviews is book number 4. This was the first book that I was gifted in the book Advent challenge that my husband did for me, and that was Insomnia by Stephen King. This book, I've been trying, like, since I read it, and it's been a few weeks, I've been trying to, like, wrap my head around what I actually think about this book. And I'm just going to talk through that because I've been trying my best. While I've put this video off, I've been trying to, like, verbalize how I actually feel about this book. And I keep getting to, like, this one word that I just can't get past. And it was just weird in a lot of ways. It was good. I'm going to start with the good. I think it was well written. Stephen King is a really great storyteller. This is my first Stephen King fiction book that I've read. And I can see why he's so, like, renowned. I can see why people place him in, like, one of the best of this time. Because it really was good. I feel like he could take kind of, like, something ordinary, like Insomnia, and, like, just take it somewhere where you never think. Like, super creative, but not over the top. It was over the top. I mean, like, the writing's not over the top. The story was over the top. Like, something I could never come up with myself. But the writing wasn't over the top. It was very much, the language was a little plain, but he had a lot of references to things that were interesting. So I'm just going to jump into it. First of all, the protagonist, I told y'all I like elderly protagonists. And it was this guy named Ralph, who's an old man. But Ralph is he also is a fresh widow. And he's navigating insomnia. But the reason that he has insomnia, like, you go through this journey on why does he have insomnia? What does grief look like? And what does life look like after the person that you spent so much of your life with passes away? What does that look like? You know, like, what's the rest of life look like at that point? And also, while I'm reading this book, I actively have insomnia to some degree. Not what Ralph had. He had a different kind. But I'm up reading this book late because I can't sleep. But it's like, I could see Derry, Maine, like the place that this book was set, like the way that he described it. You're placed in this little small town, and you actually feel like you walking down the street with Ralph and whoever else in this book, because he's just so good at, like, painting this scene and this setting that I appreciated that. I appreciated going through, like, Ralph's day to day. It got to a point where, from, like, the 10% point to the 85% point of the book, I'm wondering what is going on. I have no background knowledge. I don't know anything about the Stephen King multiverse. I know nothing about any of his other fiction works outside of a couple of movies that I saw as a kid. And I'm confused. I'm like, I get what's happening, kinda, but what's actually happening? Like, I have a theory, and then as soon as I think I know what's going on, I realize, like, 2 chapters later, that's not what's going on. It did have some references to some Greek mythology, like Atropos, Clotho, and Lachesis, the people that's, like, is said to, like, be in charge of purpose and accidental things, I guess. It was very interesting. I did not expect this book to go the direction it went in. And I feel like, because I didn't have any kind of background knowledge, I thought the book was good, but I don't feel like I could appreciate it like somebody who is a Stephen King fan already, or somebody that's already, like, went through some of his other books. And then after I talked to people about it, after I posted my initial thoughts on Instagram, so many people said that I would appreciate it more if I like knew about Stephen King's Dark Tower series, or I had like some other books under my belt. So I can see how that's the case. Again, this book was still good. It was just, one, I feel like so much went over my head because I didn't have that backstory, and two, it was just weird. Like some of the stuff that happened, I was like, what, like, how did we get here? What is this? Not like, what is this? And he wrote, and I had to keep reading it because I wanted to see like, what are we talking about? What's going on? What is this? So I kept reading it, and it ended up good, but it was weird, and that's, I don't even know how else to describe it. And I've been trying to figure out how to verbalize how I actually feel about it, and that's all I can think about. And so that's what I'm gonna stick with. That's what I'm gonna stick with. Um, yeah, it was good, but it was weird. Yeah. Another thing that kind of shocked me, because I didn't see any hints of this in the synopsis, was Stephen King did like insert a lot of his, well, I'm assuming like when you read it, you could pretty much assume where he stands on like certain controversial topics. And some people, that's a major turn off. It was a little overkill for me, like some of the stuff where, like, I know what you think. Like it was heavy on some like controversial things, and he made it clear over and over and over and over and over and over where he stood on this, which is cool like a couple times, but like, sir, we get it. But yeah, anyways, I didn't think the length of the book was an issue. It was long, but I enjoyed the story. I like Ralph. I attached myself to him in the story and was really really invested on where he was going, what he was doing. I liked I liked being in a small town dairy and everything that went on there, and then seeing the other characters. Like, I enjoyed it. It was weird, but I enjoyed it. So yeah, that's it for today. Thank y'all for sticking through it. Let me know if you read any of these, what you think. And also, if you ever have recommendations for a book that's about like unlikely friendship or has an elderly protagonist, let me know. Like, leave a comment so I can check it out, because I will. I will. Thank y'all.